My son texted me, "You weren't invited to dinner, my wife doesn't want you there." But my name is Yvonne, and at 58 years old, I thought I had seen it all as a retired teacher and mother to my only son, James. I saved every penny throughout my life to give him the best, including helping him purchase his dream house with his wife, Ashley. But last Thanksgiving, I received a text that shattered my heart. "You weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." I stared at those words, tears blurring my vision. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt taken for granted by family. James and I were always inseparable. After his father passed away when James was only 10, it was just the two of us against the world. I can still remember his little hand gripping mine at the funeral, looking up at me with those wide brown eyes that looked so much like his father's. "It's okay, Mom. It's okay. I'll take care of you," he had said. Those words melted my heart and cemented our bond. For 25 years, I dedicated myself to being both mother and father to him. I worked as a third-grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary, spending my days nurturing other children's minds and then coming home to focus all my remaining energy on my son. We had our routines: Friday movie nights with homemade popcorn, Sunday morning pancakes shaped like whatever James was interested in that week, and summer road trips in our old station wagon. I lived frugally, putting aside as much as I could from my teacher's salary into savings and James's college fund. There were many nights I sat at the kitchen table after he went to bed, clipping coupons and calculating budgets by lamplight. New clothes for me could wait. James needed soccer cleats. My vacation could be postponed. James needed a computer for school. Every sacrifice felt worthwhile when I saw him thrive. When James earned a scholarship to State University, I couldn't have been prouder. We celebrated with a special dinner at home. I couldn't afford a fancy restaurant, but I made his favorite pot roast and apple pie. He called me every Sunday during those college years, telling me about his classes, his friends, and eventually about a girl named Ashley. Ashley seemed sweet enough when James first introduced us during his junior year. She had a bright smile and laughed at all the right moments when James shared childhood stories. But thinking back, there were subtle signs I chose to ignore. The way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she looked at me. How she would redirect conversations away from James's childhood memories. The slight grimace when James mentioned our close relationship. Their romance progressed quickly. Within a year of dating, James announced they were engaged. I was surprised, but supportive, wanting nothing but his happiness. When they began planning the wedding, I offered to help financially. What I thought would be a modest celebration quickly ballooned into an extravagant affair at Ashley's insistence. "Mom, Ashley has always dreamed of getting married at the lakeside resort," James told me, his eyes pleading. "I know it's expensive, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime event." The final bill came to nearly $40,000, most of my carefully accumulated savings gone in a single day. But seeing James happy made it seem worthwhile, even as I noticed Ashley barely acknowledged me at the reception, too busy talking with her college friends and new in-laws. After the wedding, the phone calls became less frequent. When James did call, Ashley was often audible in the background, asking who he was talking to, and mysteriously needing his help with something urgent, whenever our conversations extended beyond a few minutes. Invitations to visit were offered, but mysteriously rescinded at the last minute. When I did see them, Ashley would make comments like, "James and I are trying to build our own traditions now," or "We really need our space as newlyweds." I tried everything to maintain our connection. I sent care packages. I suggested meeting for lunch near James's workplace. I invited them for holidays with plenty of advance notice. But slowly, inevitably, I felt my son slipping away. 3 years into their marriage, James called me with excitement in his voice. "Mom, we found it. Our dream home. It's perfect. 4 bedrooms, a huge backyard, great school district, but what, sweetie?" I asked, already knowing what was coming. "We can't quite afford it. The down payment is more than we have saved, and with Ashley wanting to redecorate everything right away." Without hesitation, I offered to help. This was my son, after all, and I wanted him to have the stability and security of a beautiful home. We arranged to meet with the real estate agent the following week, and I brought my checkbook. The house was certainly beautiful, a 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch in an upscale neighborhood. The price tag was steep, $750,000. I tried not to visibly wince as I wrote a check for $250,000 as a down payment, nearly wiping out my retirement fund. "Thank you so much, Mom," James said, hugging me tightly. Ashley stood beside him, already making notes on her phone about paint colors and furniture. "Well, I want my future grandchildren to have a wonderful place to grow up," I said, looking meaningfully at the couple. They had been married for 3 years, but hadn't mentioned children yet. Ashley's smile tightened. "We're not planning on kids for several years, Yvonne. I want to establish my career first." What I didn't realize then was that the down payment was just the beginning. Soon after they moved in, the requests began. The kitchen needed to be gutted and redone to Ashley's specifications. The hardwood floors weren't the right shade and needed to be replaced. The primary bathroom needed a complete overhaul with a spa tub and rainfall shower. Each time James would call with apologetic tones. "I hate to ask Mom, but Ashley really has her heart set on this. We'll pay you back someday, I promise." I set up automatic payments for their mortgage for the first year, another significant monthly expense. I kept meticulous records of everything I spent, creating a folder with all 174 receipts, partly to track my dwindling savings and partly because James had mentioned eventually paying me back. My small retirement condo felt increasingly cramped as I downsized my lifestyle to accommodate these expenses. I canceled my cable subscription, stopped my twice-monthly hair appointments, and gave up the travel plans I'd been dreaming about during all those years of teaching. But I told myself it was worth it to help my son build his life. When I expressed excitement about seeing the renovations, there was always a reason I couldn't come over. The contractors were working. They were too busy with work. Ashley wasn't feeling well. Eventually, I began to wonder if I would ever see the results of my financial investment. "James, I'd really like to see how the renovations are coming along," I said firmly one day on the phone. "I'm free any day this week." After a pause and muffled consultation with Ashley, he reluctantly invited me for Saturday afternoon. When I arrived, Ashley barely greeted me before disappearing upstairs, leaving James to show me around. The renovations were indeed beautiful and clearly expensive. The kitchen now looked like something from a luxury magazine with marble countertops and high-end stainless steel appliances. "It's lovely," I said sincerely. "Now, which room will be mine when I come to visit? You mentioned setting up a guest room for me." James looked uncomfortable. "Well, actually, we decided to use the fourth bedroom as Ashley's home office. She needs the space for her freelance design work." I nodded slowly, trying to mask my hurt. They had a 4-bedroom house with just the two of them, yet there wasn't space for me. The message was becoming increasingly clear. Over the next several months, the distance between us grew. James's calls became even less frequent, and when I called him, he often didn't pick up. When we did speak, his tone was distracted and hurried. I noticed they were active on social media, posting photos of dinner parties and barbecues at their new home, events I had never been invited to. In one photo, I recognized James's cousins from my side of the family, people I had introduced him to now, socializing in the house I had largely paid for while I sat alone in my condo. When I did receive an invitation to visit, Ashley's behavior was increasingly cold. She would make comments within my hearing like, "I can't wait to have the house back to ourselves," or ask James loudly, "How much longer is your mother staying?" At James's birthday dinner, which I had offered to host but Ashley insisted on having at their home, I overheard her in the kitchen talking to her sister. "It's exhausting having her here," Ashley said. "She's always looking around the house like she's taking inventory of what she paid for. James needs to cut the apron strings." I quietly slipped away from the doorway, my heart heavy. Later that evening, when I tried to give James his birthday gift, a watch that had belonged to his father, Ashley interrupted. "James already has 3 watches, Yvonne. He doesn't need another one, especially something so outdated." The hurt must have shown on my face because James quickly said, "It was Dad's, Ashley. It's sentimental." But he placed the watch on a side table rather than putting it on, and it was still sitting there when I left. As months passed, James began serving as a messenger between Ashley and me, rarely speaking for himself. Ashley says Ashley feels preceded most of his sentences. When I expressed concern about our fading relationship, he would say, "You just need to try harder with her mom. She's sensitive." During a rare lunch with just James, I asked directly, Are you happy, son? He seemed startled by the question. Of course I am. We have a beautiful home, good jobs, everything's fine. But he didn't look me in the eyes when he said it. My friends began expressing concern. My best friend Rita was particularly blunt after I canceled our movie night because James had finally agreed to a phone call during that time. Yvonne, honey, this isn't right. You've given that boy everything and he treats you like an afterthought. And that wife of his treats you like a bank account with legs. I defended James automatically, but her words lingered. That night, I calculated how much money I had given them over the past few years. The total made me dizzy, nearly $400,000. Almost my entire life savings gone. But more painful than the financial strain was the emotional distance. The son who had once told me everything now seemed like a stranger, one who allowed his wife to disrespect the mother who had sacrificed everything for him. As November approached, I began thinking about Thanksgiving. For years, even after James moved out, he had always come home for my traditional turkey dinner with all the fixings. Since his marriage, we had alternated. 1 year at my place, 1 year with Ashley's family. This year should have been my turn. James, I was thinking about Thanksgiving, I said during one of our increasingly rare phone conversations. Would you and Ashley like to come here, or should I come to your place this year? There was an uncomfortable pause. We haven't really decided yet, Mom. Can I get back to you? Days passed with no word. I called again but got his voicemail. I sent a text, just checking about Thanksgiving plans. Need to know if I should buy a turkey. No response. A week before Thanksgiving, I ran into Rita's daughter at the grocery store. She mentioned in passing that she and her husband had been invited to James and Ashley's home for Thanksgiving dinner. It sounds like it's going to be quite the gathering, she said cheerfully, unaware of the knife twisting in my heart. Ashley's been posting all about her menu planning on Facebook. I nodded and smiled through my shock, then went home and checked Facebook. Sure enough, there were Ashley's posts detailing her plans for a 20-person Thanksgiving celebration at our home, the home I had paid for. The guest list included Ashley's family, some mutual friends, and even my nephew and his wife, but not me. I called James repeatedly over the next few days. My calls went straight to voicemail. I left messages trying to sound casual rather than desperate. James, honey, it's Mom again. Just wondering about Thanksgiving. Please call me back. Finally, 3 days before Thanksgiving, my phone dinged with a text message. I felt relief seeing James's name until I read the words, "You weren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." I stared at the screen, reading and rereading those 11 words. The casual cruelty stunned me. No explanation, no apology, just a flat statement of rejection. And this came just 3 days after I had sent them $5,000 for new kitchen appliances to prepare for a dinner I wasn't welcome to attend. I sat down heavily on my couch, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Tears burned my eyes and spilled down my cheeks. The physical pain in my chest was so intense I briefly wondered if I was having a heart attack. All those years of sacrifice, of putting James first, of emptying my savings account, to give him the life I thought he deserved. And this was my reward. A text message telling me I wasn't wanted. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake replaying every moment of our relationship, wondering where I had gone wrong, how I had raised a son who could treat me this way. By dawn, my sadness had hardened into something else, a realization that I deserved better, even from my own child. As the sun rose, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at my small kitchen table with renewed clarity. The path forward suddenly seemed obvious. I picked up my phone and typed a single word in response to James's devastating text, "Okay." No arguments, no pleading, no angry tirade, just acknowledgement and acceptance of the situation. Then I got to work. First, I called my bank and spoke with my account manager, Janet, who knew me from my years of careful saving. I need to cancel all automatic payments to these accounts, I said, providing the details of James and Ashley's mortgage and utilities. Are you sure, Mrs. Reynolds? Janet asked. These are significant changes. I'm certain, I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. Next, I called the mortgage company directly. I had been making the payments as a goodwill gesture, but my name wasn't on the mortgage, a fact that now worked in my favor. I informed them that I would no longer be making payments on behalf of the homeowners. You'll need to contact the actual mortgage holders about future payments, I explained to the representative. Effective immediately. I then opened my banking app and went through the painstaking process of deleting every single payment record and receipt, all 174 of them. Each deletion felt like removing a weight from my shoulders. I wasn't erasing the evidence of my generosity. I was freeing myself from the expectation of continued financial support. That afternoon, I met with Theodore, my financial advisor, explaining the situation frankly. I have essentially given away my retirement security, I told him. What can I do to protect what little I have left? Theodore's kind eyes showed concern without judgment. First, we need to make sure your accounts are secure. Let's change all your banking passwords and set up alerts for any unusual activity. Then, we need to assess what remains and create a new budget for your actual needs, not their wants. My next stop was a lawyer's office. Patricia Brown specialized in family law and listened patiently as I explained the financial arrangements with James and Ashley. Were these gifts or loans? She asked directly. I suppose I thought of them as investments in our family relationship, I replied. James mentioned paying me back someday, but nothing was ever put in writing. Patricia nodded. Without documentation stating these were loans with expectation of repayment legally, they would be considered gifts. However, we can draft a letter clarifying that any future financial assistance would be considered a formal loan requiring repayment. I agreed, and she began preparing the documents while I sat in her office. When I walked out 2 hours later, I had a folder containing legal protection for my remaining assets and clarity about my financial situation going forward. As I drove home, my phone began to ring. James's name flashed on the screen of my car's Bluetooth display. I pressed the ignore button. It rang again, immediately. Ignore. Again. Ignore. By the time I reached my condo, I had 12 missed calls and 8 text messages. I turned off my phone, completely made myself a simple dinner, and for the first time in years, focused entirely on my own needs rather than worrying about James and Ashley. The sense of relief was palpable. I had spent so many years contorting myself to fit into their lives, draining my bank account to fund their lifestyle, and accepting emotional scraps in return. No more. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months. The next morning, I turned my phone back on and was greeted by a barrage of notifications. 27 missed calls, 35 text messages, even emails which James rarely sent. The messages showed a clear progression. Mom, the mortgage payment bounced. Is something wrong with your account? Mom, please call me ASAP. There's a problem with the house payment. Mom, why aren't you answering? This is important. Mom, what's going on? The bank said you canceled the payment. Mom, we need to talk right now. There were also several messages from Ashley, whose number I had never saved in my phone but recognized. Yvonne, there's clearly been a mistake with the mortgage. Please call immediately. This isn't funny. We have bills to pay. You can't just stop payments without warning. The final few messages from both of them had shifted from demanding to pleading, Mom, please, we need to figure this out. Yvonne, I think we should talk. Can we come over? I took a deep breath and texted James. I'm home now if you want to talk. Less than 30 minutes later, there was a frantic knocking at my door. I opened it to find James and Ashley standing there, both looking agitated. James's hair was uncombed. Ashley's eyes were red-rimmed, and both were still wearing what appeared to be yesterday's clothes. Mom, what's happening? James demanded as they pushed past me into the living room. The bank said all the payments were canceled. They said you called them directly. I closed the door calmly and turned to face them. That's right. But why? His voice cracked with stress. The mortgage payment bounced. Do you know what that will do to our credit score? I sat down in my favorite armchair, gesturing for them to take the couch. I received your text message about Thanksgiving dinner. It was very clear that I'm not welcome in your lives except as a financial resource. So I've decided to respect your boundaries by removing myself completely. Ashley stepped forward, her normally composed face twisted with anger. You can't do this. We have an agreement. Do we? Was there something in writing that I've forgotten? I asked mildly. James looked between us, confusion evident. Mom, this is crazy, so we didn't invite you to one dinner. That doesn't mean you should punish us financially. One dinner, I repeated. James, let's be honest with each other. When was the last time I was welcome in your home? When was the last time either of you expressed gratitude for the hundreds of thousands of dollars I've contributed to your lifestyle? When was the last time you stood up for me when Ashley made dismissive comments? Ashley's face flushed. This is so manipulative. You're using money to control us. I shook my head. No, Ashley, I'm simply no longer allowing my money to be used while I'm excluded and disrespected. There's a difference. Mom, James said, lowering his voice and trying a different approach. We're family. Families help each other. Yes, they do, I agreed. They also respect each other. They express gratitude. They make space for each other in their lives. They don't send cruel text messages excluding their mother from holiday celebrations. James at least had the grace to look ashamed. I shouldn't have sent that text. I was stressed and what? James taking orders from your wife, forgetting everything I've sacrificed for you, forgetting how I raised you alone after your father died, working 2 jobs sometimes to make ends meet. The room fell silent. I continued, my voice steady. I've consulted with a financial advisor and a lawyer. I've documented every penny I've given you, which totals nearly $400,000. I was advised that I could potentially pursue legal action to recover some of those funds as loans, but I've chosen not to. Ashley's eyes widened. You were going to sue us. I said I chose not to, I corrected her. However, my lawyer has prepared documentation making it clear that any future financial assistance, if there ever is any, would be formal loans with repayment terms. I have copies for you. I handed them each a folder containing the legal papers. James took his with a shaking hand. Ashley refused to touch hers, so I placed it on the coffee table. You need to understand something, I continued. I'm not angry. I'm not trying to punish you. I'm simply establishing boundaries that should have been in place long ago. I will always love you, James. You're my son. But I will no longer fund a lifestyle where I'm not respected or included. So, what now? We're supposed to lose our house because you're feeling slighted? Ashley snapped. Your mortgage is your responsibility, I said simply. You both have good jobs. You might need to budget more carefully or delay some renovations, but you can manage your financial obligations. James looked devastated, caught between his wife and his mother. For the first time, I saw realization dawning in his eyes, awareness of how he had allowed this situation to develop, how he had failed to stand up for me, how he had taken advantage of my generosity. Mom, he started, then stopped. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything right now, I told him gently. You need to go home and think about what kind of relationship you want with me going forward. One based on respect and love, not financial dependence. They left shortly after Ashley storming out first, with James following more slowly, looking back at me with confusion and hurt in his eyes. I closed the door behind them, leaned against it, and took a deep breath. The confrontation had been difficult, but necessary. I felt drained, but also strangely empowered. For the first time in years, I had advocated for myself. I had set boundaries. I had demanded respect. And regardless of what happened next, I knew I would be okay. The holidays that year were quieter than any I could remember. I declined invitations from well-meaning friends who didn't want me to be alone, explaining that I was actually enjoying my own company. And I was. There was peace in my small condo, decorated simply with the ornaments and mementos that held real meaning for me. On Christmas morning, instead of rushing to prepare a meal for others, I took a long walk along the lakefront, breathing in the crisp winter air. I thought about James and the many happy Christmases of his childhood, the year he got his first bicycle, the handmade cards he would create with such concentration, the traditions we had built together. Those memories weren't diminished by recent events. They were still precious, still real. But they were part of the past, and I was learning to live in the present. In January, I joined a book club at the local library. In February, I volunteered to tutor struggling readers at my old elementary school. In March, I signed up for a watercolor painting class I had always been interested in, but never had time for. My world, which had narrowed to orbit around James and Ashley, gradually expanded. It was nearly 3 months after our confrontation when James called again. I had heard from mutual acquaintances that they had managed to keep the house with Ashley taking on extra freelance work and James getting a promotion at his firm. Mom, his voice sounded different, humbler perhaps. Can we talk? We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our homes. He arrived alone, which surprised me. Ashley doesn't know I'm here, he admitted after we had settled with our drinks. She's still pretty angry. I understand, I said, and I did. Ashley had built her lifestyle on my financial support, and its removal had forced difficult changes. No, I don't think you do, James said, meeting my eyes directly for the first time in years. She's angry, but I'm ashamed. I've had a lot of time to think about how I've treated you, how I let Ashley dictate our relationship, how I took advantage of your generosity. He took a deep breath. The text message about Thanksgiving. Ashley wrote it, but I let her send it from my phone. I stood there and watched her type those words to my own mother, and I did nothing to stop it. What kind of son does that make me? The pain in his voice was real, and part of me wanted to comfort him to say it was okay. But it wasn't okay, and pretending otherwise wouldn't help either of us. A son who lost his way, I said gently, but perhaps one who can find it again. We talked for hours that day, more honestly than we had in years. James acknowledged how he had allowed Ashley to come between us, how he had been conflict avoidant to keep peace in his marriage, how he had justified taking my money while excluding me from their lives. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted. Ashley still feels you abandoned us financially. She doesn't understand why I want to rebuild our relationship. You can't fix your relationship with me until you fix your relationship with yourself, James, I told him. You need to decide what kind of man, what kind of son you want to be. Not what Ashley wants, not what I want, what you want. He nodded, slowly. I think I've been afraid to make those decisions. It's easier to just go along. Easier in the short term, I agreed. But look where that's led us. Over the following weeks, James and I continued to meet regularly, sometimes just for a quick coffee, sometimes for longer conversations. He shared that he and Ashley were in counseling addressing not just their financial issues, but deeper communication problems. She's not a bad person, Mom, he said during one of our talks. She's insecure and grew up in a family where everyone competed for attention and resources. She saw our relationship as a threat. I appreciated his loyalty to his wife, even as I maintained my own boundaries. I made it clear that while I was open to gradually rebuilding a relationship with both of them, it would need to be based on mutual respect, and it would not include financial support. By summer, we had established a new normal. James visited me regularly sometimes with Ashley, who remained coolly polite but was making efforts. I was invited to their home for James's birthday, a smaller, more modest gathering than in previous years. The guest room that had mysteriously been unavailable before was now set up, albeit simply for my visits. One evening in late August, Ashley approached me as I was helping clear dishes after dinner at their home. I want you to know, she said stiffly, that I understand better now why you did what you did. I didn't at the time, but I do now. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was a start. Thank you for saying that, Ashley. We all did the best we could with what we understood at the time. She nodded once and returned to the dining room. James, who had overheard, squeezed my shoulder as he passed. Baby steps, Mom, he whispered. Baby steps. And he was right. Relationships aren't rebuilt overnight, especially when trust has been broken. But with time, effort, and clear boundaries, they can be mended. I never did resume financial support for them, though occasionally I gave appropriate gifts for birthdays and holidays. I redirected my resources toward my own needs and pleasures. A trip to Italy, I had always dreamed of regular lunches with friends, donations to causes I believed in. I found joy in giving from a place of choice rather than obligation or guilt. The most valuable lesson I learned through this painful journey was that true family relationships must be built on mutual respect and appreciation, not obligation or financial dependency. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for healthy relationships. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling behaviors that ultimately harm both of you. I also learned that it's never too late to reclaim your life to establish your worth beyond what you can provide for others. At 58, I discovered new passions, new friendships, and new strength I never knew I possessed. If you're watching this and struggling with family members who take advantage of your generosity or fail to respect your boundaries, remember you deserve better. Setting limits isn't about punishment, it's about creating space for healthier relationships to grow. The people who truly love you will adjust and remain in your life. Those who were only there for what you could give them will fall away. And that's okay too. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and self-discovery. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did it change your relationship? Share your experience in the comments below. Remember, your worth isn't measured by what you give to others, but by how true you are to yourself.